All right, everyone. I am very, very excited today introducing you my very special guest, Cooper Chapman. He used to be a professional surfer for well over a decade, and through his experiences, he has now essentially created a very beautiful organization specifically focused on supporting individuals and empowering them to resolve mental health challenges, mental health issues, to come back to the truth of who they are, to experience joy from this understanding that actually we get to experience. He has essentially served thousands of people, supporting them with their challenges, supporting them with what they need to really come back to themselves, and various organizations as well. So I'm very, very excited to have a conversation about the mental health aspect of humanity today and see what are some challenges that we're still experiencing. And also for some of you who are, watching this, perhaps you're experiencing a specific challenge with your own mental health experiences. And I hope this conversation can really, really support everyone who are essentially watching this. So Cooper, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Stoked to be here.
Beautiful. So share a little bit about your journey, because mental health is such a nuanced thing, in terms of what people move through. There are so many different facets of their expressions of their lives, whatever past events and experiences they've been through. And based on your experience working with so many different individuals, what do you perceive has been some of the root causes that have got you to where you are today? And why are you even doing this for the world?
Yeah, wow, massive question. I could probably speak for an hour and tell a story to get my whole way there, but I guess I'll start with when I was like 6 years old, two important things happened in my life. I grew up in Sydney, so when I was 6 years old was the Sydney 2000 Olympics. But also when I was 6 years old, I lost an uncle to suicide. So why the Olympics was such a big part, it led me to, for one, seeing all these people achieve these amazing results and represent their country, and it made me want to be an Olympian. It made me want to be an athlete. It made me want to strive and get those accolades and the praise that comes with being a high achiever. So that was something that was very pivotal. And that led me down the path throughout my teenage years to pursue a whole range of different sports. I played a quite competitive rugby union, but the one that I, fell in love with the most was surfing. And I had quite a lot of talent. And I went through my junior career with, quite an interesting mindset of, if I'm doing really well, I feel amazing, I feel great, I feel inspired. But if I'm doing poorly, I feel, quite less. I felt, depressed at times and, felt like I was less of a person if I wasn't achieving these big goals that I set out to have. And then the second thing that I mentioned before that was pivotal when I was 6 years old was losing an uncle to suicide. And I didn't realize until recently the impact that that sort of had on me. But it's left me with this almost underlying awareness, but also underlying fear that maybe I might end up with a mental illness one day. My dad has struggled a little bit throughout my teen years, so I always thought like maybe I'm going to end up a little bit like the men in my family. So because of this, I was always pretty forward thinking, what can I do to take care of my mental health, but really rode this roller coaster of, emotions with my results in my surfing. And that was kind of a bit of a snapshot of my teen years. And then I went from sort of top three junior surfers in Australia to kind of like big fish, small pond in Australia to small fish, big pond in the international scene. And as well as kind of my results declining a little bit in the surf comps, my mental health really started to decline. I didn't realize at the time why, but I really realize now it's because I was basing my whole self-worth and identity was on external validation, what other people thought of me. And because of this, I was struggling because my results were down. So I spoke to my psychologist about it, and he said, like, mate, you can't base your self-worth and your identity on your career and your achievements. Like, that's what you do, but it's not who you are. Like, who are you? What are your values? And that sent me on a path throughout my 20s to kind of be very curious about mental health, but taking care of my own values and understanding who I was as a person. And, reading a lot of books and kind of just maturing, I guess you'd call it, but being a bit more self-aware and understanding, that we can be a lot more control in our mental health if we do these certain things that are scientifically proven. And then when I was like 25, like 5 years ago now, my youngest of three sisters, within a fortnight, lost two friends to suicide in her last year of high school.
Yeah.
And, hearing of youth suicide is like one of the most dreadful things ever. But I kind of, looked up some of the stats around mental illness and suicide and went like, wow, this is a massive issue we've got here. Like, maybe I can do something about this. And I was like, maybe I can go and talk to a few kids at my old school. And like, I've learned some really valuable lessons through great sports psychologists, through high level Olympic coaches, through, my own fear of mental illness, but quest for knowledge. And yeah, I was like, maybe I can go and talk to some kids at a school or two and share my knowledge. And then, yeah, now I've retired from surfing. I do it full time and I've kind of made my own little space of kind of trying to inspire people just to take those daily actions for their mental health. I interview hundreds of people on my podcast who are experts in wellness and psychologists and neuroscientists, and just try and give the most simple information to people through my workshops, through my podcast, through my communities, and just get people taking that first step towards, better mental health and realizing just because you don't have a mental illness doesn't mean you don't have mental health. Like we
Yeah,
should all.
that's such an
Sorry,
important.
very long-winded bit of a story, but hopefully you kind of grasp a bit about me from that.
That's perfect. And that's an important distinction. Doesn't mean the fact that you do not have a mental health challenge doesn't mean that you do not have a mental health, right? And
Totally.
that's like so important. And suicide seems to be a huge thing as well. Like I'm from Singapore, and in 2023, we average around about more than one suicide per day. So it is not. I don't think it's an
What's the population in Singapore?
6, 7 million probably, like 6, 7 million.
Yeah, that's actually like lower per capita than Australia. I'm pretty sure Australia is like 2,300. So what's that? That's like basically the suicide rate is just tragic, right?
Yeah, it's insane. And it's so interesting because I've always had this perception that when someone chooses that path, they are literally saying no to life. They are literally saying that the path that I'm on right now and the journey that I'm on, I see no light at the end of the tunnel, right? And in your experience, especially in such a competitive environment that you were, facilitating, and yeah, especially with athletes and the competition and all of it, what do you feel with some of, yes, the attachment to a certain identity of what the result meant for us? And also, what were some of the experiences that you've seen in others, in other athletes, and perhaps within yourself that really creates that there's no light at the end of the tunnel mentality? Like, where does it really come from?
Yeah, it's a very deep question, but I just think, I mean, a lot of the time it is really sad when athletes who are still mid their career take their life. There was a golfer that it happened to recently, mid like after one day of the event, in between the 4 days of the golf event, he took his own life, which is just tragic. So, I mean, there's obviously the pressure of like, if I don't make this, then I can't support my family. Like, but it's yeah, higher stakes. It's kind of like higher stress. I mean, if you lose your job, you can go get another job. If you like fall off the golf tour, it's very hard to be able to make the same amount of money again. So like, there's obviously the pressures of finances. I think is a big one for people, as an athlete. But I also think like the hard thing for so many athletes is we put so much of our attention and life and effort into one thing, and then like someone gets injured and
Yeah,
it feels like, wow, my purpose in life is gone. So that's like a big one. Um, but I think the biggest one is usually when athletes finish their career, you always hear of like people, their identity crisis that you kind of have. And I was like quite aware of that throughout my career. That's why I built my business while still competing. But I think a lot of athletes finish their career in a lot of sports, especially if you go professional young and without, much other formal education behind you. You get to the end of a career and you're really good at a sport, but you don't really have many other skills in life, and you feel like where do I fit in this world? So like I empathize and feel for athletes, who feel like they're just in such a dark place because of either their self-worth is attached to their achievement, their results, not the sort of person they are. They're, feel like everything comes down to their results. It's a sad place to be, and it's a place that I've felt I've been in at times for sure.
yeah, that's significant, right? Because like for myself, my attachment wasn't necessarily to the whatever you guys have been through. My attachment was towards like how much money I was making.
Mm,
Right? So it's kind of like my identity became a part of that. You know, how much I was making is equivalent to how worthy I feel in society, right? And
hmm
it naturally translates into the sporting arena as well in terms of that. And based on your experience, like as people are moving through that and they're moving through like competing and they're moving through their own self-worth issues, what do you feel would be some of the best strategies or tactics for an athlete to really like integrate into their routines, into their day-to-day as they are competing to really support them with their mental health and to support them with their sense of being?
I mean, I think the first one that a lot of athletes are doing, but I know a lot aren't, is meditation. I think just like building the awareness that like you are not your thoughts. Quite often they're untrue, very often they're unhelpful. And that's why you see so many top level athletes now working with mindset coaches, working with psychologists, trying to understand what's going on up here because we all have so many thoughts running through our head every day. And so many of them on average are negative just because of the way that our brain's formatted. Whereas if we sit with those thoughts for a little bit each day, if we do guided meditations, if we do still meditations and just learn to calm the mind, I think like whether you're an athlete or not, there's just so many benefits to meditating frequently, whether it's once a day, once a week, but just sitting with your thoughts and not escaping them always, because that's,
Yeah.
obviously the real challenge when it comes to suicide and mental illness is those thoughts being so neglected for so long that they just take over and we can't deal with them. So I think meditation is a great one. And then as well, this is more so being specific. I mean, not even specific for athletes. It's for anyone who's right now listening to this. You have the privilege to be able to have a device, to have, an opportunity to be able to listen to something like this, like gratitude, whether it's for, you might be going through a really challenging time and it's not about comparison and going, well, he's got it better, he's got it worse. It's just about gratitude, the fact that there's like the amount of things that have magically happened in perfect sequence for you to be here right now and breathing and living is like enough to be grateful for a lifetime. But when you start to really look around and go like, every good, every bad thing in life has led me to right now in this moment, I'm still alive. I've still got a chance to make a decision later today, then I'm grateful. A lot of people are in situations where they're, trapped and, take their own life or, yeah, there's just so many people that are struggling. And, it's not about comparison. I think it's just about being grateful that there's this a magical thing that we live that's called life and just looking around for the things that are going well rather than the things that aren't going well. Because there's going to be both every day in your life. So why not focus your energy and your thoughts on the good stuff? And science and neuroscience shows us it releases serotonin and oxytocin in our brain. It makes us feel good, releases it in our gut. It's like, these are all backed by science, but we need to actually practice it. And that takes conscious thought. So meditation can help us with that. But then also gratitude in that conscious thought can also start to change that brain chemistry to just feel a bit better in life.
Yeah. So how do you infuse that in your life? Is there like a routine or a ritual that you move through?
Absolutely. So I started this thing on Instagram like 3 years ago now called the 1% Good Club. So I have this theory that we should give 1% of our day to our mental health.
Yeah.
1% of a 24-hour day is 14 minutes and 24 seconds. So I'm like, okay, less than 1% of your day, 14 minutes we should do for our mental health. So I was like, well, we should do 10 minutes of meditation in the morning when we wake up and 4 minutes of gratitude reflection at night when we brush our teeth, when we're, on our phone before we go to bed or whenever you are. We write down three things we're grateful for. We spend 4 minutes reflecting, and there you go. You've spent less than 1% of your day on your mental health. So I was like, but you're more consistent to do this stuff if you have an accountability group. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, how can I build an accountability group? So part of me, I started a thing on Instagram where every single morning I send a link to a meditation link to click on YouTube. And then every single night I write three things I'm grateful for. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll see every day for the past 1,330 days now, I've written three things that I'm grateful for from my day on my Instagram story. But what people don't see is then I send that story to these group chats, which there's 9 of these group chats, which have about 150 in each. So there's about 1,400 members who every day write their three gratitudes as well. So over the last 3 years, the 3 years I've done it in a row, everyone gets a meditation link in the morning. So I reckon I would have, created over hundreds of thousands of hours of meditation because of the links that I've sent. But then the cool thing is there's been like over 500,000 gratitude sent in from people in that community. So that's how I try and keep, and I did it to keep myself accountable. It's completely free. Everyone in the community doesn't pay anything. All you got to do is send at the Good Human Factory a direct message on Instagram saying, I want to join the club. And you get added into the group chats every morning. You get the link to click every night. You do gratitude, and that's 1% for your mental health. So looping back to your question, how do I stay accountable to do that? I yeah, run that community. So I do the meditation each morning and then do the gratitudes every night. So that's like my bare minimum.
Yeah, and that's such a great way to infuse your life into your business. It's like a
Mm,
beautiful integration because so many like thought leaders think that, for example, people who are starting out in business and they're like, how do I build a community? How do I essentially like create a brand? And all you've got to do is just infuse what you're already doing and create a group of individuals that just align with what you're doing. Right? And
mm,
then lo and behold, you've got like 1,400 members who are just vibrant, who are just, in resonance with what you naturally do. And there you
yeah.
have a business in various capacities, right? So yeah, that's such an amazing way for us to really like keep ourselves accountable, and also execute upon what we say we want to do and not just
Mm,
talk about it and not actually execute upon it, right? Which is
yeah.
so important. And for myself as well, like every night before I go to bed, for me it's a night thing. Like every night before I go to bed, non-negotiable. For me, I call it the four life mirrors. The first is the mirror of gratitude, which means infuse gratitude in every aspect of my life. When you essentially experience a safe flight, maybe you had an amazing day, an amazing experience, and you hang out with amazing friends, like can be anything and everything, right? The second is the mirror of integrity, which means like what parts of my day was I reactive? Was I not in alignment? Was I saying yes even though I wanted to say no? Was I saying no even though I wanted to say yes? Like where were some aspects of myself did I act out of integrity because of maybe like a social conditioning or a borrowed belief or a need to be loved or accepted or things that just betray yourself, right? And then the third thing is like it's like a body like gratitude aspect. So really infusing love to my entire body and my being. Like I can see, I've got two arms, two legs, how many people want to experience that themselves as well. That's insane. And the fourth thing is for the potential. So what is your purpose? Like what do you actually want to how do you want to infuse purpose into your day the next day? So that gets me really like really coming back to myself and very, very conscientious of the thoughts that I have in my mind because sometimes
Mm,
like just the noise, like just all the mental thoughts that come forth can be quite overwhelming and distracting,
mm.
whether you're in a career, in a business, or any of those sorts. So,
I love all that. The one I really love is the second one, the integrity, because
yeah,
I think that's the piece that a lot of people really miss when it comes to this idea of like living by values, living in integrity, without the self-reflection at the end of the day to take sort of stock on what day you just lived through, if you are proud of the decisions you made, because so many of us just and then go to bed.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like by
literally.
actually taking time to self-reflect and build that self-awareness is beautiful. I like that.
Yeah, and it keeps you centered to your values. Like sometimes
Yeah,
people talk about like what are your values, and I feel as though a lot of the times when you ask someone their values, sometimes they just express their values based upon what they perceive an idea of a version of them like gets to say.
exactly.
Like I
That's
just
it.
want to be that value and not really like.
What are your values? It's how well do you live to your values?
Oh man, yeah, literally like the embodiment is so important. And I always treasure this understanding, like whether you believe in God, the universe, source, whatever that you choose to believe is as divinity. At the end of the day, like divinity like really requires you to be in balance with yourself. Like, and that means are you in truth with yourself? Because at the end of the day, that's essentially what we're all wanting to experience. How truthful can we be to ourselves to live the most fulfilled versions of our lives? Right?
Mhm.
So that's so important. So you mentioned at the start the difference between mental health and mental illness, right? Doesn't mean you do not have a mental illness, doesn't mean you will not have doesn't have a mental health stuff, right? So in your experience, like how do you actually educate and empower people to become more conscious of their mental health, right? And differentiate it from mental illness?
The way that I try and explain it to people is imagine we have like the spectrum of mental health from good mental health down to mental illness. And everybody is on that spectrum, no matter where you are. If you're a happy person all the time, maybe you're up towards the good, the good mental health end. If you know you're really struggling, you have depression or you have a mental illness that's been diagnosed, maybe you're down the mental illness side of the spectrum. But we are all on there. So the way that I describe it and the way that I sort of conceptualize it is basically let's call like 1 and 2 out of 10 is mental illness, and then there's people on the borderline, who aren't quite diagnosed but are struggling. But then I like to think about life as if it's almost a treadmill. And the treadmill's slowly always bringing us back towards mental illness. Life's challenging. Life's bloody hard. We all go through challenges like the death of a family member, the loss of a job, the illness or an injury we go through. We have a relationship breakdown. We have financial issues. Like there's undeniable challenges that we are all going to face. So that's that treadmill that's slowly speeding up. Slowly moving at times. Sometimes it feels like it's speeding up. So the way that I kind of think of mental health is it's a, constant treadmill of life. We've got to always be doing something to work towards good mental health. And the way I like to bring that up is if you're down at, and I fully understand and really try and empathize, well, I really do empathize with people who have like absolutely debilitating mental illnesses who are incapable of, taking some steps towards that and really need the assistance, maybe to get them back on that treadmill slowly through the incredible support systems that we really do have. And I know they're not perfect here in Australia, but we have Lifeline, we have the government can put people on free mental health plans, and I understand the system's really flawed and it's hard to get into a psychologist and there is barriers.
Like, really?
I
Yeah.
mean, there's a long wait for psychologists. So like, and I specifically like try and say like, I'm not a mental illness expert. I'm not in the mental illness space. Massively support a lot of the organizations that are there, but it's almost like 99% of the organizations are really mental illness support seeking advice. So important. The way I see myself is those people from like a 3 out of a 10 to a 10 out of 10. How can we develop skills so that every single day we're walking against that treadmill so less are falling off the back into that mental illness? And guess what? The people sitting at a 2 out of 10, you might learn some of these skills and it's going to bring you up. So all the stuff that I talk about is all basically simple, holistic approaches to life that I've learned through experts on my podcast. And I do it because I don't want to ever be prescribing someone a medication. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but the things that I talk about are mindfulness. I've done meditation courses and learned so many great things through experts in mindfulness and meditation. So I talk about that. I talk about gratitude, very simple stuff, but try and explain the science, try and explain people how to practice it. Great, there's another few steps against that treadmill. I try and talk about empathy and taking personal responsibility, a few more steps against that treadmill. Talk about kindness and the science behind kindness. There's all incredible data studies that shows that people who are kinder are happier people. There's another few steps on the treadmill. So my kind of thesis and theory is not enough people are taking any steps against that treadmill. So if I can give a few little things that the science literally shows, neuroscience proves that this stuff will help with your mental health, even if it is just a tiny bit, even if it's just placebo, there's a few steps against that treadmill. So hopefully that gives a bit of an abstract way of
That's
how I define mental health and mental illness, and hopefully allows everyone to understand, yeah, we're all on that treadmill, so we should all be working towards the other end of
Yeah,
it.
100%. And the consistent as like for yourself, like the consistency that you have integrated into your life and into the people that you impact is so important, the consistency, like because consistency beyond, intensity, is what creates sustainability, right? And,
Yeah.
and people sometimes forget that, like even the small little steps that you take every single day, they stack up over time. And
Hmm.
that's so important. And what you have essentially expressed in terms of consistency is this, like which is so cool, right? Because the treadmill is like each day, each step forward, steps forward, steps forward, steps forward, steps forward, and consistency in a way whereby like if you're not consistent with your mental health, you naturally like create disease and then you create illness. Right? It's the same thing if you're not consistent in terms of how you give to yourself, in terms of how you nurture yourself, you're gonna fall sick, you're gonna be in disease, right? At the end of the day, it's consistency. So with your experience, what has been and is your relationship to self-love, and how does that relate to mental health?
Well, that's a good one. I think self-love, I mean, there's so many different ways you can look at it. Self-love is exercising and eating nutritious foods and getting enough sleep and, taking care of your hygiene. But for me, the biggest growth in self-love has come in the way that I talk to myself, is trying to create mental peace. And I mean, for me, it come through like, yeah, a lot more meditation, but I read a lot of books and I've kind of decided that I feel like I want to live in a hybrid of nihilism and stoicism. I'll explain that in the way of like, for me having a mindset of nihilism, which I guess for people, I've only just learned what the word actually means recently, but my sort of understanding of it is kind of understanding that nothing matters. in the world that we're living, like it's all made up anyway, and everything matters. It's kind of like whatever way you want to look at it.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I look at it. And by having that mindset, it allows me to like drop this. Oh, it's like everything seems so heavy sometimes, but then sometimes I'm just like, you know what, nothing matters. But then the other side of it with Stoicism, I believe is just about the art of understanding that sure, nothing matters, but inside my world matters. My experience in this plane until this, life ends matters to me. And I feel like that's what Stoicism is taking personal responsibility, accountability, being happy with your decisions. And that way you can live in that peace of mind as well. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's just some
That's
thought
perfect.
been
That's
having
perfect.
a look.
Yeah. Key question. Do you believe in past lives?
Haven't given enough thought to give an educated answer. I yeah, I haven't had
Like
experiences. But
just
yeah,
I'm just curious, just tuning into like what feels true for you specifically beyond like the constructs and the concepts. Do you believe that this is the only life that you've lived?
I'm leaning towards no, just because I feel like so many things come to you that
Yeah.
yes, like how I get that. But I also feel like we're all pulling from a field of knowledge that just comes to us. So whether that's a past life or just past energy that wasn't my life, but it's like the matter that makes up me has been floating around the earth for a long time. I don't know how weird you want to go
Yeah,
right now. I
it's,
can go
it's,
weird.
yeah,
I think I
like
have some crazy thoughts sometimes, but
like
I yeah, I don't know. I spoke to a psychic actually yesterday on my podcast, and she was kind of like, "Oh, your grandpa's sitting there behind your shoulder." So that makes me think if there's an afterlife in that realm, like, is there a past life? I don't know.
yeah, and that's the beauty of this, right? Like there are so many things that we're still grasping and still like seeking to understand. It's this understanding that like again, like no matter how much we try to create certainty and comprehension in our lives, there is always going to be something out there that still confuses like what your mind thinks reality is. So there's like one end of the spectrum as you've experienced, like everything doesn't matter because everything is kind of like a construct of reality anyway, and we get to make up our own rules, we get to create whatever the fuck we want. So it's a bit like that, right? Like at the end of the day, like this is just one life out of multiple lives, or this is just like one dimension out of multiple dimensions. It's
Yeah.
like that's why
That's where that's where probably my nihilism comes from. Like, yeah.
exactly, right? Yeah. So
I'm just like, where's the fairness? Like I've had friends that have just sort of like died in freak accidents. It's like, why? It's just we're only here for the existence we
exactly.
have. And I see so many people live it with such resentment and anger and hatred. And I had that for a while, but now I'm like, well, I'm gonna get from now to the time I die, I may as well do it with as many days with a smile on my face and an open mind and a curiosity and a joy as an underlying baseline. Whereas I feel like many people's baseline is sitting below that and they need something to bring them up.
Exactly. And it's this interesting paradox, that we hold. Like death as a certainty allows us to be all right with uncertainty.
Mm,
Like, because we're going to die anyway, whatever comes forth, we get to create what we perceive is the reality that we want to live in this given lifetime, which is kind of like back into like stoicism, right? Like the various capacities, like this life is ours to create. You are
mm,
provided and you're being given this one life for whatever fucking reason, right? Now
yeah.
you have to make the most of it. And what do you actually want to create on this life? And
Mm,
that's something that a lot of people struggle with because they come into this lifetime, and that's where a lot of mental disease come about as well, because they come into this life and they have like, I have no idea why I'm here. All I experience is pain. All I experience is suffering. All I experience is like life happening to me, right? And they struggle to actually make like create a cohesiveness of why am I even here and for what purpose? What is the everything matters aspect of me beyond that everything doesn't matter, right? Like
mm,
what is that purpose piece? And because people struggle with that purpose piece, what ends up happening is without that anchor, and purpose comes from values, right? Purpose comes from values. Purpose comes from your life events and your experiences. It comes from elements of that, nuances of that. So without that, without the anchor, you essentially naturally get either you get pulled into other people's version of reality, and then you realize that, oh wow, I'm living someone else's version of a life,
external validation. Yeah.
right? Or you get lost in this whole narrative, or in this whole whatever, that life is shit, or life is not good, life is not great, because you have not found the life that you truly want. So in your experience, what has been your relationship with your own sense of purpose, and this vision that you're facilitating with the Good Human Factory? And why is this so important for you personally and for the world as well?
Okay, I've got a few places I can go with this. Thank you, by the way, for this chat. These are some fun questions. I don't normally get to answer stuff in this way. Um, so the Good Human Factory. I mean, I used to be a professional surfer, and I always kind of felt this underlying guilt of like, why did I get deserve to live this incredible life of traveling the world surfing with my friends? And don't get me wrong, I had goals bigger than what I achieved, and I felt like I underachieved at times, but I also look back and think I overachieved, so whatever. But I always had this like underlying guilt that like, why do I deserve this like 0.01% epicness of a life and other people not? So having that as an underlying just feeling and sense for a long time, I read quite a lot of books through my 20s when I was trying to understand my values. And one of the books I read, I can't exactly remember where the lesson was, but it might be a hybrid from a few lessons in different books, but was people talking about this idea that you sort of climb this mountain of achievement that's your own mountain,
Yeah.
and you get to the top and you look over in the mountain of service of helping others and like service back to the greater good. That's where you actually get fulfillment when it's about them, not about you. And there's obviously a tightrope to walk there because obviously, self-mastery and this idea of doing good. But I'd like got close to the top of that mountain with my surfing and I was like, is this it? So anyway, when jumping back to the early part of this conversation, when my sister lost that second friend, I'd been coaching some kids in surfing, just trying to pass on that knowledge. I've loved the idea of sharing knowledge. I think it's such an important thing to do is to learn stuff, to decipher it how you wish you got taught it in an easier way and then share it with other people. I think that's one of the joys of life, getting to learn something, make it easy to understand and then teach somebody. So I'd done that with some surf comps, and then that's where the spark to go, maybe I can go talk to these kids at school, might help them with their mental health. And then that's where I started to get that. Once again, it probably comes back to that underlying external validation, but I started to get some really nice feedback that what I was teaching was really helping and carried a lot of imposter syndrome of like, who am I to be teaching this stuff? But it also, another thing that I learned was like, if not you, then who? And I'd always be like, oh, well, why not? And then on top of that, I, started to feel purpose. I'm giving back, but it wasn't making me any money for like 3, 4 years. I was like working other jobs and doing everything I could just to be able to do this as a bit of a side hustle and help people because it was great. I was, doing a few workshops here and there, and the kids were liking it, but very hard to get your foot in the door in this space and like really hard to build credibility at schools. And I had no business background. But I'd also just never, I'd worked a few years on the tools and I was like, I didn't have the mindset to feel purpose that I'm building a house suite. I'm helping somebody have a house to live in amazing. I didn't have that mindset. It was kind of like, oh, I'm building this house for this guy who can afford this sick house. And here I'm working for 20 bucks an hour. So I was always quite entrepreneurial. How can I like offer value and get paid for the value rather than for my time? So yeah, fast forward, the Good Human Factory started to realize that you can get paid quite well for public speaking. I realized I was quite good at it, but I was getting that purpose piece that I was not missing with surfing. Like, great, you bring joy to people getting to watch surfing at the highest level. You've dedicated your life to it. Amazing. But I just wanted more than that. And then, yeah, the business started to do well. I started to interview people. They started to say, it's really nice that I get to share my story and give them a platform to open up a bit, which brought more purpose. But then the greatest thing is like with the Good Human Factory now, like I get to kind of run my own business, live the days that I want. Like right now, I'm just sitting in my office at home. I just made schnitzel for lunch. I went for a run. I went for a swim at home. All my ambassadors for my business are pro athletes that are my friends. So it's kind of like a business by design. I can go and hang out with my mates and go surfing and wakeboarding and motorbike riding. And it's kind of hanging out and working with my ambassadors. So I've kind of built a company around this concept of like giving back is feels great, but it's also, I think, like the real fine art in what I think is the greatest achievement in life is having a business that is very successful financially, but it's also helping people, a social enterprise, something that's really contributing to the world, but that you can be smart enough to make it creative, that you're really helping people, but it's also making you a lot of money. I think that's like the sweet spot in business. Like, there's a lot of people who make a lot of money that aren't really doing the world a positive service or are just kind of creating something that's, not a net positive for society. So to have a business that is about service and giving back, kind of, I think, yeah, adds that purpose value.
Yeah, it's very, very different, right? It's so important, exactly what you said in terms of a business that is both profitable, sustainable, and also of service, like a social enterprise in various capacities. And that's what I've I've begun to even realize, like through my own business journey, the first advance of my business is all about making money and helping other people make money. As a digital marketing agency, it was all we
Mm.
focused on, like the matrix, the quantitative, like how can we help our clients make more money and so on and so forth. And just by doing that, what I've come to realize is that with the team that I was building and then the clients that I was serving, I began to see, like, because over 50% of our team members are from the Philippines, right? So I began to see the impact that that's having with their families, because now they get to, experience a consistent flow of income without leaving their homes, right? Working remotely, whereas like a lot of previously, like a lot of Filipinos have to leave their home country to become domestic workers or so on and so forth to fund the money back into the home country. And then seeing like the impact that I was making with my clients in terms of the time they were spending with their families and stuff like that. That was like the first iteration of like, oh, just by um doing things from a place of like, I want to support people, I want to help people, you naturally see that ripple effect. And of course, that
Mm.
version of me was also kind of like figuring out myself and kind of like very excited about like the prospect of money. So I was also like spending money on shit that, just gave me external validation, as we all do sometimes. And then that began to evolve into what we are doing now with the schools and like really revolutionizing the education system, introducing like the curriculums and seeing the impact there as well. And that's the thing when you start to run a business that comes from like the hearts, that comes from like you just want to support people and empower people in all that they are, right? What have been some of the moments in your business journey and your business experience that in that moment, the event and experience, you felt this overwhelming depth of like gratitude and love for all that you do?
Oof, it's a big question. I've had like hundreds of messages and just people reaching out saying that the workshops really changed their perspective. But I'll give you one, and this one was actually right at the beginning of my journey. So that the ones at the beginning of my journey, I think, were some of the most important because it made me just really never
Yeah.
when the days were slow and the business wasn't making money and I was going into debt and I had no work and I was hustling to get stuff going, I'd think back to these moments. So I'd probably I was about 20 episodes in, and this was another reason why I almost like gave up the podcast because the podcast
Yeah,
company
it's like,
I used to be with Listener, they kind of they were great. They used to be called Podcast One. They turned into Listener. My show wasn't growing quick enough at the start, so they basically they didn't even clip me. I said, "Can I go to more frequently?" And they said no. So I was like, "Okay, can I take it over myself?" And they said yes. So I was like, "Cool." So I took it over. And this is one of the reasons why I took it over and kept going myself was because I had this guy message me on Instagram going, "Hey mate, just wanted to reach out. My name's Zach. I'm from South Australia. Me and my brother love listening to your podcast. The way you talk about mental health is really powerful. It's really been helping us. Unfortunately, my brother lost his battle with mental illness a few weeks ago, or like last week. Been a really tough time for myself and my family, but I just wanted to let you know he really loved the podcast and it might have given him an extra couple of weeks, I reckon, because he, has been struggling and we listened to it together." And then he put at the end, like, "If it's possible, would I be able to mention you and the Good Human Factory at his eulogy, at his funeral?" And I was like, wow, just from my podcast, these conversations I had with like, my first 20 episodes, which were, not getting many listens, but there were some of the people who listened. So then that guy, Zach, mentioned it at the funeral. I was doing a giveaway for my merch really early days, and I did a competition where I was going to fly someone and their friend from anywhere in Australia to come hang out with me and my mates. Like I said before, the ambassadors, the surfers and wakeboarders. So I picked these winners, and then I was like, maybe I could ask this Zach guy if he wanted to come up to the Gold Coast. So I flew him up with like the money from the business. Look, like gave him a few days away, hanging out with my mates and wakeboarding, and just gave him he was like my age, but he just lost his younger brother. Oh, yeah, older brother. Anyway, so it was nice to be able to give that back to him. But now he's become one of my good mates. I went to his wedding. I was like stayed at the house with him and his groomsmen. And then at the wedding, this is kind of the crescendo of where I'm going with this story, was like almost everyone in his family came up to me and was like, "Wow, you're that Cooper guy." Like he said so much. Then this isn't to blow my own horn, but just to show the impact of just doing a kind gesture for someone can do. That started from the podcast was all of his family members, from like his uncle who was like a bikie that looked scary as hell, coming up to me, shaking my hand, looking me in the eye and saying like, "Thank you so much. Like what you did for Zach really helped him." Um, through what the hardest time of his life. And I was like, that was just like out of him reaching out to me and saying something nice about the podcast. I just gave him a kind gesture, and now he's a good mate of mine. And like, just shows like they're the stories that, whether that's because of my business or not, but it's been the catalyst for different moments like that. But that's one of the really special ones. And then I had Zach on the podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to his story from when we've kind of first met, he's like episode 25 of Good Humans podcast. But that's just like a nice story of, getting to, contribute to, I mean, it's just being a nice person to anyone. It doesn't have to be through your business.
Exactly. Like you can never comprehend the depth and the ripple effect that will come forth from you simply choosing love in your actions.
Mm.
It's like you can never comprehend, like such a beautiful story, and that kind of like inspired something that came out, like a memory that came out for me as well. Like, and this is for all of you that are, watching this. Maybe you are afraid of taking that first step towards, living a life that you truly want to live. Maybe there's this sense of like imposter syndrome, or this sense of like, what if I'm not good enough, or stuff like that. Simply by taking that first step, you can never truly predict what will come forth in the impact that you'll make just by taking that first step. And I remember when I was like starting my first business, and like a lot of my people were from the Philippines, and there was this guy who came into my DMs, and like I started like messaging me and saying, "Oh, I love your content, blah blah blah." We started having a conversation, and I was looking for like a more remote sales specialist back then, and then brought him into the company. And in that point, he was so grateful because he was in the inflection point of being cheated on by his partner, and that pain that came from that. And he was like literally homeless, and he was on the brink of like suicide and all of it. And just providing him with the opportunity, he ran with it. And then when I ended the business, he left. And then we recently caught up. And then now, because of the foundational aspects that he has learned from just being in my company, he now has a wife, a kid, a home, a car, building this amazing entity in the Philippines, and just being so grateful for all that I've provided for him. And just it was just me just doing my thing, different things. It's like you can never like truly comprehend or understand the impact that you make just by taking that first step.
Just one little decision, right? Like I'll give you one more story like that. It's not even my story. It's a guy that I had on my podcast recently. His name's Ben Lowe, and I'm sure he's happy with me sharing this. He shared this on my podcast, but this was just a moment that I had. He was like a criminal that was in and out of prison and drugs and all this bad stuff. And he'd got out of prison and was getting his life on track, and then got called out by the police for another old charge, and he had to tell his boss at this gym that he was working at, and he was just expecting to get fired. But the guy was like, "Well, what can I do to support you through this?" And he's like, "If he didn't say that to me and he fired me, I would have gone back to selling drugs. I would have ended up back in prison instead, because he said, 'No, I'm going to support you through this. What can I do to help?'" He's like, I got through that next court stuff that I had to go through. He supported me, and then he started a charity now to support young boys who are going through the criminal system, who don't have any mentors to support them. So that one guy making that, "No, I'm not going to call you a dead shit criminal, I'm going to support you. Why is this happening? What's going on, mate?" Created now all these next, he's been inspired now to do this. So it's like you can change, kind of like, it's such a big
Whole
ripple sometimes.
trajectory. It's like it's insane, right? And this is the thing, like the universe always, like whatever you believe in, conspires to provide you with opportunities to rise beyond your circumstances.
Mm.
Always. Like there will always be certain moments in your life, like even for those of you who are watching right now, just reflecting back and just thinking back, there's always been moments in your life where you've been given an opportunity to rise beyond your circumstances, right? At the end of the day, it's like, are you willing to choose it? Are you willing to bet on yourself? Perhaps for the first time in your life, choosing yourself, and it's been such a powerful journey, like even for yourself, the journey that you have been on. In with your like network and your community, you are friends with different athletes, different maybe potentially like public figures in various capacities. Like, what do you reckon is the role of these people and these thought leaders when it comes to shaping the narrative around mental health?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting space, really. So often, I think there's a language thing that we need to tweak maybe in the next near future. The idea that we all have mental health, whereas if you say the word mental health to someone, we straight away think mental illness. We straight
Yeah,
away,
negative
yeah, like
connotation.
I'm a mental health nurse.
Yeah.
It's like, but it's, I don't know what you change it to. Like, it sounds pretty bad saying I'm a mental illness nurse, to sort of labeling someone as if it's something wrong with them as an illness. Like, I don't know the answer to it, but I just think if we can start to look at mental health like we look at health, more people would
Yes.
recognize that we need to actively do things to maintain good. You don't get good health unless you eat healthy, unless you exercise, unless you get a nice enough sleep. But we expect to have good mental health, but every time there's a chance to sit with our thoughts, we go on our phone and distract ourselves.
Run away
We
from
just, before going to bed, we watch Netflix to fall asleep to sound instead of actually having, dialogue with our thoughts. So I think once we start to look at mental health as if something like the treadmill analogy I started with today, if we start to recognize, okay, what are we doing for our mental health? So why I'm saying that is I think there needs to be and I'm sure you'll agree with the education stuff, there really needs to be
Yes.
a change up in the education system, I believe. No fault of all of the teachers. I think teachers are doing an amazing job. It's not their fault. I don't even think it's the education system's fault. I
That's a
just think
point.
the world we're living in is very different to the past 20 years with technology. We need ways to let kids like brains switch off and defry for the day. And that's obviously not a very technical term, but this is just my own theory that I just think, yeah, we need to learn some of these incredible things that I've learned that you would have learned that all, science but leads to is really good for people like mindfulness, like gratitude, like kindness, like empathy, but they are skills that you need to work on, and
Yeah.
not enough of us through the education system learn those skills, and then we get thrown out in the big wide world and we have mental breakdowns. We, struggle. So I think it comes back to step one is education. That's why I'm so passionate about the space I'm in, really trying to shift perspectives. Um, but then also, yeah, I think it just comes back to a big time of like teaching people that, you know, life's going to be tough, but here's some skills that you can take on your journey that might help you when times get tough. And I don't think enough of us have them. But the industry is very well equipped for the other side, not even enough equipped. But I think we need to start looking upstream. What are we doing wrong for so many people ending up with mental illness and suicides?
Yeah. And share your story. Like don't underestimate the power of your story, right?
Mm,
Like the truth within your story. Second last question. With the
for it.
Good Human Factory, what are your future plans? What are you guys actively engaging in right now? And where do you see the evolution of mental health in Australia or perhaps even the world?
Yeah, wow, loaded question. Good Human Factory right now. I've tried to do this a few times, employ like somebody to help me with everything, but I haven't found the right fit. I've just employed someone new. The main thing for me is like 50% of or probably like 60, 70 now percent of the revenue is me doing hosting and delivering keynote speeches and workshops with high schools, with corporate groups, with sporting clubs, with conferences and events.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is like lead generation and trying to get booked. And a lot of mine comes down to word of mouth. And, it's taken me years to build the list. I've spoken at over 100 schools now. I've spoken with companies like Red Bull, Telstra, McDonald's, Apple, Amazon, Westpac, and built a pretty nice client base now. So for the next little period, it's trying to, continue to find new clients who, find the value in the workshops that I deliver. I also do merchandise. I've just sort of been trying to pump merch out. Maybe I can talk to you. I've got no idea about ads or SEO or anything. Like I've never got the advertising right. So trying to get the merch slowly trickling out, it's always a big thing. The podcast will continue to roll on as it has been for the last 4 years. Need to sort of give that a bit of a freshen up soon. But the big exciting thing is I've just got a big book deal with 𝗲𝗲𝗄𝗏 Publishing. So I'm got to write a 60,000 word book by the end of February or by the end of March. And I'm not much of a writer, so I need to start
But
writing the book. And it's going to be all around the concepts we spoke about today. The book's going to be called The 1% Good Club. And it's going to be about this theory that we should give 1% of our day to our mental health. And I'm going to share all of the best sort of lessons and expert tips on all these different modalities and my story in the book. And then you'll finish with like a little sort of pledge saying like, all right, I've learned all of these different healthy things. I'm now part of the 1% Good Club. I'm going to try and spend 14 minutes a day. On average, you might miss some days, you might do a bit more some days, but I'm going to try and take that 14 minutes, those 2 steps along the treadmill every single day for my mental health. So that's the book that I'm working on, which will
Amazing.
then morph into next year. All of my workshops will potentially be based around this 1% concept that we should do 1% for our mental health, and then educating people on some very small 3 to 5 minute habits they can integrate into their day. Why, the science behind it, but try and make it like fun and engaging and make people go, oh yeah, I can do that. And then the evolution from that is making an app as well that's kind of like the groups that I had on Instagram, but lots of different things going on in my world.
Yes.
So just trying to work out how to structure and strategize to yeah, grow it. As I've also got a big partnership, the Good Human Factory, with Surfers for Climate, a big charity where we've partnered, where we're doing education with high school students around taking care of our oceans, but also taking care of your mental health. And the combination between environment health and mental health is really intertwined, because 70% of young people in a recent survey showed they have eco anxiety. They have fears about the future of the planet,
All
which I
right.
think most of us do. So we're trying to morph the two together. So that's another partnership that yeah, the Good Human Factory is doing.
Beautiful. Final question. So, if I give you this mic, and this mic, the moment you speak into it, every single individual on this planet will receive the message, right? So, this mic, the moment you speak into it, every single individual on the planet will receive this message. What would you say?
The next time you're about to get furious, stop, take a breath, and get curious instead. Why am I feeling like this? What is that person going through that I'm about to get angry at? Can I be more still to resolve this issue?
Beautiful. I love it. So whenever you feel as though you're getting furious, get curious. I love it. That can be a tagline or t-shirt.
I've got it's on my hat. Get curious, not furious.
Ah, I love it. See? Perfect. All right, for everyone who is watching this and they want to connect with you, maybe learn about what you do, where can they find you?
You can find me personally on Instagram, just at @𝗂𝗏𝗀𝗃𝗏𝗃. The Instagram for the Good Human Factory is just at the Good Human Factory. And the website, if you want to learn more about the workshops that I run, if you want to find the podcast, if you want to find the merch, or anything more about the Good Human Factory, you can head to the website, thegoodhumanfactory.com. And then the podcast is just Good Humans with Cooper Chapman on all platforms and on YouTube. But yeah, if you got any questions, if you want to learn or chat about anything I've shared today, just reach out on Instagram. I love getting to meet people who take the time to listen to conversations that involve me. And yeah, I'd love to collaborate on stuff with anyone who has crazy, wild ideas.
Perfect. I will drop Cooper's details in the description down below. Such a pleasure, brother. Love the work that you're doing, and I'm very, very excited for how your vision evolves and also in various capacities, future collaboration synergies with my business in terms of the education space. So very keen for
Can't wait. Would love to catch up. We'll have to have a coffee and talk business very soon.
that. All right. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and believe in our mission to create a positive impact in the world, hit that subscribe button so you never miss our epic content. If it inspired you, share on social media. Imagine the ripple effect we could create together. Don't forget to tag me using my social media handles in the description below. We have some mind-blowing episodes coming up that you won't want to miss. Together, let's create a wave of change. Stay curious, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.